Welcome to the Strasburg Railroad, America's oldest operating short line, still under its original charter from 1832. Let's take an in-depth look at the railroad and its pieces of equipment. The Strasburg Railroad, the oldest operating short-line railroad in America, featuring some of the most unusual steam locomotives from the steam era. Let's start with the largest and youngest locomotive on the roster, number 90. Strasburg 90 is a two-tin decapod built in 1924 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works for the Great Western Railroad in Colorado. She served there until 1967 when she was bought by the Strasburg Railroad, and when she arrived, she instantly started building up a reputation. '90 is the youngest and largest locomotive of Strasburg's fleet, and you can often find it pulling their passenger train through the Pennsylvania countryside. Next up is number 475. 475 is a 480 mastodon built in 1906 by the Baldwin Locomotive Works for the Norfolk and Western Railroad. She served there until the late 50s when all steam on the N&W was retired. She arrived in Strasburg in the early 90s and has been operating ever since. .475 is Strasburg's second largest locomotive and most unusual due to its wheel arrangement. It is the only operating 480 left in the United States. .475 is not always 475. On a couple of occasions in the past, Strasburg has dressed up 475 as her twin sister, number 382, including a couple of cosmetic differences. 382 was made famous by O. Winston Link's photographs of the Virginia Creeper. 382 is unfortunately no longer around, but when 475 is dressed up as her, the 382 seems to come back to life. Last, but definitely not least, is number 89. 89 is a 260 Mogul built in 1910 by the Canadian Locomotive Works for the Canadian National Railroad. She served there until she was purchased by the Green Mountain Railroad in New Hampshire. After only a few years there, she was purchased by the Strasburg Railroad and has operated there ever since. 89 is Strasburg's smallest steam locomotive and can often be found on not-so-busy days or on the weekends pulling the half-hour consist. A very rare sight in the modern world is seeing a steam locomotive on an actual revenue freight train. Not many railroads still haul revenue freight, much less with steam power. Strasburg is one of the few places in North America you can actually see a steam-powered freight train. Another thing that makes Strasburg even more popular is their events. In fall 2019, Class J number 611 from the Norfolk and Western Railroad visited the Strasburg Railroad and operated for several weekends through September and October, including passenger trains, Bodo freight trains, and at the throttle runs. Another rare sight in the modern world is seeing two steam locomotives double-heading. Strasburg is one place that, on occasion, you can see a great example of that. Now, let's follow Strasburg 90 as she pulls the regular passenger train from East Strasburg Yard to Lehman Place in Paradise. The first crossing is Paradise Lane, also known as Fairview. Strasburg's roster of passenger coaches includes standard coaches, a dining car, 2 lounge cars, and a parlor car. Due to the lack of a turntable, Strasburg's locomotives have to run tender first to the end of the line, where then they will run around to the other end of the train and pull locomotive first back to Strasburg. The next crossing is Cherry Hill. Here, when they run two passenger trains on weekends, the two trains can pass each other. On the way back from Lehman Place, we will stop here and let passengers off at the Picnic Grove, nicknamed Groff's. The next crossing is Carpenter's, or Black Horse Road. Here, 90 will stop and blow her whistle. In the distance, you might just hear the ghost engine reply. In reality, we all know that that whistle is just an echo. But, gotta have an imagination. Ninety has run around her train in Lehman Place and is now on her way back to Strasburg. As mentioned earlier, the train stops at Groff's Grove on its way back to Strasburg. Here, number 90 is stopping at Groff's Grove as Norfolk and Western 611 sits on the siding. '90 has now let off all passengers that wanted to get off at Groff's Grove and is now about to deadhead back to Strasburg.
I'm scared.
We are now arriving in East Strasburg Yard, which means that 90 has completed yet another successful run to paradise.
Strasburg Railroad is a great place to visit if you are a railroad enthusiast or if you just want to ride a train.